It's not that we get to just be spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings in physical form. And, when we are born, it is the quarter of form.
Hello, and welcome back to the Live Young podcast. My guest today is Victoria Fenton, whom I've known a short time, and I already have the deepest respect and reverence for her from an energetic perspective and just your knowledge, her knowledge. If you're watching, you can see this, and expertise on so many different things and so many different levels. And I'm in awe by every sense, and I wanted to share her just generous heart and also like wealth of information and magic with you. So thank you for tuning in. As you can see, I always light candles before and sort of have my crystals and sage and all the things just to sort of honor that this is a ceremony, that any time we have the opportunity to connect, to share, to just be in this moment and breathe in our bodies is a gift. So thank you for joining. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here.
First, I just want to know about you. If I were to say who are you? What would you respond to that? Who are you?
Well, that's so hard as a question to answer, but I think when I come down to it, I am a functional medicine practitioner, but I'm also a mystic and someone who respects both science and spirituality and who does their best to incorporate all elements of what it means to be alive, both into my daily work and practice. Also, just generally with everything I do, I try to bring spark and light to it with a real respect for what it means to be a human being.
So beautiful. And I love your honoring of the mystic, because when I met you, I came in for my 3-month blood, draw reading to understand what was going on in my body. And I had, heard you do human design and just mention that in your appointment. I was like, okay, whatever. And just sitting with you in a few moments, I could see the extent to which you understood way beyond what you see with the physical eye. And it made me feel so seen and understood, because I speak to the mystic too, and it wasn't something I chose to speak to, it was something that chose me. And I get a chill thinking about that. But just in your definition of self, I think that's so awesome, because you didn't really lead with the resume, and it wasn't a test, but it was just to see where you stand on that, because, we live in this world where we so often define ourselves by what we do or who we're with or where we're from. And, you're so much more than that. So, yeah. So in that, functional medicine is how we met and then sort of understood each other in a different way. But did functional medicine find you first, or did the mystic find you first, or how did that look?
The journey, the journey. It's interesting because it's taken me a long time to claim both elements of what I do and find the intersection. So actually, the mystic did find me first. So I was introduced to human design when I was very, very young. I was 15 when my mom came home and went, "Oh, you don't have any emotions, Victoria," because I have an open emotional center. And of course, as a 15-year-old, I was like, I think I do. And so that started my investigation into self-awareness practices. And then I met Richard Rudd and became very involved in the Gene Keys and was in this world of archetype and I Ching and mystery, but also with this practical element of human design, which is actually very mechanical. It's very scientific. It's kind of formulaic in a way. And I was pulled in both of these directions, but also looking at Chinese medicine and thinking about the energetic links between things and energy toning movements and meridians and all of those things that I still remember to this day and have as part of my wheelhouse. And I then got sick. So I became very unwell when I was 17. And it was a bit of a mystery illness at the time. And it was life-altering. So I was away on holiday during one summer and was very sick one night and was never the same again. And so my mysticism or self-awareness practices ended up becoming part of my, oh, maybe I need to use these to make me better, especially as I was diagnosed originally with eating disorders and various psychiatric and psychological problems. it would go on to not be the case that that was what I was dealing with. I had a very physiological problem, but I threw everything I could into the understanding of the psyche and also the understanding of the soul and where does this come from and what is in my destiny around this. And all of those elements became so paramount. And then, honestly, I had to have a rupture away from that world. I needed to not be in the kind of contemplative, ethereal, disconnected somewhat world. And I threw myself into medicine. I got into, okay, so this has to be a physiologically managed condition. What can I do? How do I study? What can I learn from the physiology practical point of view? And ended up studying as a naturopath in the UK and a functional medicine practitioner and a nutritionist, and ended up with all of this skill set and still wasn't better. And so it was only in the culmination of bringing these sides together and realizing the holistic nature, and that if things are manifesting physiologically, they're also manifesting psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And how do we access each individual person's soma, their physiology, in a way that really attunes to what they need to recover from whatever they're dealing with, whether it be a classical physical problem or a mental, emotional, spiritual one.
When you got, thank you for sharing so much. When you got sick originally at 17, my body goes to like some sort of spiritual awakening. Because if you were led down that path at such an early age, like, how did that feel in your body? Obviously you were ill and all these things were manifesting, and I don't know if there was like trauma or whatever that like led to these things, but it almost feels like you were just like chosen, and like, and felt like super confused around it. Like, what do you do with all of this energy? I mean, does that relate?
It does latterly. So I think when I was 17 and I first got sick, I was just busy. I just wanted to get back to my life. I was like doing a piano exam. I was in the school play. I just needed to get back into finishing my schooling and my education. So I wasn't thinking about it in that way. I think the moment where I had that, oh, this is an awakening, or this is an initiation, perhaps the right word, was later. It was on my 18th birthday when I met Richard Rudd for the first time, and he gave me a Venus sequence reading, which was not at all what it is now then. And I realized, oh, this happened for a reason, and I don't know what I'm here to do. And I don't know whether that's a big thing or a little thing, but this is what this is for. And so then the journey changed. And so it took me about 9 months of not really understanding and not wanting to have what I was going through, for sure. I was just, let me get back to life. Let me figure this out and get on with it. And then I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is what I'm here to be, to learn through. And that's when things changed for me. But still scary and stupid. And like, I didn't know what this was all going to turn into. And I think I thought it was going to end every minute for a long time. But in the end, my total journey of kind of from onset to really feeling at home in my body was probably 13 to 15 years, depending on when I count my healing date.
And in that, like, as a 17-year-old, I can imagine how isolating that must have felt to, I don't know what your relationships were like, but like these things are happening and it's like, who do you speak to? And I think it's really beautiful. Maybe you could explain how, first, maybe like what is human design and gene keys, just high level to anyone listening that doesn't understand. And then how, Richard Rudd came into that to sort of maybe hold you in this feeling, to give you some sentience of like hope that like you were going to be okay, or there was meaning to this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So high level human design is a functional system around astrology sort of thing. You can think of it in terms of where the planets were at the time of your birth. It gives you an insight into your auric type, so what your aura manifests as in the world, and therefore how to best make decisions. So how does the aura that you have best interface with the world around you in a very mechanical kind of scientific way that's very deep. You can go incredibly deep in terms of layers of analysis, but ultimately it's a system which shows you your strengths and weaknesses, where you have solid, consistent, reliable you energy, and also where you're influenced by the world around you. And by having those frameworks of understanding, it's a tool to support your navigation through life in a more easeful way. It's actually founded on the principles of the 64 archetypes of the ancient Chinese I Ching. So those ancient words and symbols that the ancient Chinese used to use as divination tools and to understand where to go next in their life, have been updated within human design to be part of the Rave I Ching. And that's all just modern language, but explaining the same archetypes, the same essence of thematic, which influences life or the human being in human design's world. And then gene keys emerged out of human design. So Richard Rudd, who received the transmission of the gene keys, was a very great student of human design, so understood the archetypes. And what gene keys does is it kind of takes away all of the charts and the analysis of human design and really focuses on the energetic principle of those 64 archetypes, same 64 as way back in ancient China, but we're now in kind of a modern mystical, a modern mystery school of what are these energetic archetypes mean and what is the journey of evolution through them. And that's called the spectrum of consciousness. So how do these archetypes manifest when they're coming from a contracted place of fear all the way to what is the ultimate expression of this archetype? And it's used very much more as a meditative journey into your own being and into your consciousness and how you can expand and explore the fragments of the archetypal nature of humanity and consciousness that you hold as an individual.
It's interesting, I've heard human design so many times over the years because I do always dance in these worlds and I'm a seeker. So it's like astrology, Vedic astrology, human design, and human design all kept pinging or people were speaking about it because it became sort of hot in the past, I don't know, 5, 8 years, 10 years. And Gene Keys is newer to the mass, right? And still most people don't know what that is. And human design never called me. It was, and it's, as you explain it, it's almost, I see it as like procedural. It's like, it's very mechanical. Even the chart is mechanical. And I don't tend to lean into anything that's mechanical because it's just not how my brain processes. But when it came to gene keys, like it really struck me because whether it was the energetics or the understanding or the archetype or it feels so much more mystical in a way that I relate to, like in a flow sense, than human design, which is like, this is who you are, this is what you're born as, this is why, and like the end, which I get. And I get why it can be used as quite a powerful tool to understand yourself and then make decisions differently or, focus on, strengths, weaknesses, etc. But like, I so believe in the water element that we are, particularly like women, that when I'm served something that like, this is it, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, this is who you are and attract and don't attract and stay away from, I'm like, where's the gray area? Yeah. So I think it's so interesting, like human design first, and then, or in Richard Rudd and Gene Keys. And then, so as this 17-year-old, 18-year-old, you're getting all of these downloads, your body is reacting, you meet this person who is a mystic. Were you like, yes? Or was it like a cult? Like, what was it? How does that?
Oh, wow. These are questions. Yes. So it was an immediate yes with Richard. It was a very mystical meeting. It was, like I said, on my 18th birthday. We were in the center of Oxford, which is a beautiful town in England. And it's very ancient in its architecture. So there are gargoyles on buildings. And so you're already in the vibration of that sense. And so I ended up at his house and he had a little tree house, basically, in his garden. And my birthday's in August, for context, but it was pouring down with rain. And so it turned into this epic thunderstorm that is going on in the background whilst I'm sitting with Richard and my mom. And he's like talking to me about myself. And it was like he was telling me things that I remembered, though I had never been told or known. And he was awakening things within me of recognition. And it was like the tiny little pilot light inside me kind of started to come online. And I started to really touch into the seams within me that were connected to this mystical truth that he was telling me. And we became very connected. I had a long way to go in the depths of practical pain. I had a long way to go. I hadn't even had my first near-death experience yet, and there would be 5 in total. So like there was times to come. And he was there at times, and he was not at others in terms of the connection of things. And he gave me hope for sure. He also was instrumental in me accepting that if I wasn't going to survive this incarnation, that was what was going to be my fate. And I became incredibly okay with that. And sort of my acceptance of death piece It's not something I talk about very much. It's clearly something you're bringing out of me in this setting, but it was instigated by him and an incredibly important part of my capacity to then go on and recover. And ultimately, I needed to be in that mystical. And then we ended up living round the corner from him in Devon, which is in the southwest of England. And it was a little culty at that point. But it was more just a cult around love. It wasn't around Richard as the guru. And it still isn't to this day. It was to the transmission, to the energy, to the information we could feel was coming through. And there were, 6 or 7 of us around a table in the countryside in Devon, contemplating what these archetypes were and meant, and how to work with them, and how to be in the frequency of love. And that was where we kind of birthed a lot of the things that now have form and have structure and exist in the Gene Keys and in the company and the infrastructure that now exists around them.
If you're listening to this and you're interested in Gene Keys human design, I know Victoria does readings, so we can give her information after, but also like do your due diligence around, there's so much information now, there's books about this, see what resonates with you. I think as we've both spoken to, like it's a tool to understand yourself better. It doesn't tell you your fate, it doesn't tell you your past. It almost, as you said in your time with Richard, like it sees you and you see, and it sort of like makes you feel understood. That's been my experience, at least, like, oh, that makes so much sense. Whenever I've had any sort of reading, it's not like been anything I didn't know. Just as you said, it was like, it validated what maybe you didn't acknowledge that you knew, but like, it just was truth. And in that, like, it's an amazing tool. So that being said, I want to go back and just thank you for being so honest about your interaction with death and coming to terms with, the finality of life. And it's interesting, my birthday's in August too. And I've had many near-death experiences. And maybe because of that also, there is this overwhelming fear of finality of the end. And I know that's a very big focus on in our culture in some strange way also. It's not something I feel I fear because, and maybe I'm curious in your experience, maybe it is also because I've been so close to it and it wasn't my time. And so I wonder if that's been your experience too.
I think it's fascinating because I think that what I have is a real sense of the duration of things. I don't really know where it comes from. I have all the self-awareness tools in the world, but if I'm in a relationship, I know if this is one with longevity, if this is a glancing relationship, and I have the same relationship with my own life, I think. And so a bit like you, even though on paper there were near-death experiences, one of which I remember vividly, like like the whole experience is categorized in my mind. I never felt it was my time. And so I feel like maybe I won't know when it is my time, but there's still work for me to do on this earth. And also I'm not attached. So I think what it showed me going through all the things that I've been through is the fragility of the bond we have with being human. It's temporary. Like this state is only here for a set amount of years. And it doesn't matter if they were going to be 18 or 80. There is finality, as you said. And the best way I found to be within my process was being less attached to the outcomes. And don't get me wrong, and I'm very aware in conversations like this, we can end up painting ourselves as like spiritual ascended people who are never lost in the human mire. I get so lost in the human mire for sure. But when I'm remembering myself, there is a surrender to the flow of the rhythm of nature, and the cadence of nature is to decay. It is not to life. And so as we focus into the decaying process of being human, it gets to take its natural course whenever that is. And bear in mind, I'm in medicine, so I spend a lot of time with biohackers and people trying to live till they're 180. And I've never understood it in some way. I'm like, one, my life's been super hard. I don't actually want 180 years of it. Like there's been a lot. But two, why are we trying to prolong? Prolonging is just like expanding our sense of reputation or importance. I don't feel like I'm important enough to live to 180. I'll do what I'm here to do, and then it gets to end.
Interesting. Yeah. I think there's such a beauty in this idea of non-attachment. And I think in every experience in life, when you can separate yourself from, what is versus what you think is and allow process, that is when life happens as opposed to
Mhm.
life happens to you. And
Mhm.
it's been a lesson I've learned and continue to learn because I like to grip and control and force and fight. Like it's really just been my greatest teaching to honor that when you relinquish is when you
Mhm.
actually start to live, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're sort of in this mechanic autopilot. And in that too, what you mentioned, this life, and what comes to me is like this external, like even this, we're having this conversation and it's not choreographed by any means. It feels
Mhm.
quite natural and
Mhm.
it's meant to serve, and it's also visual, and it's in this external world, and there's this social media aspect, and it's like everything is externally
Mhm.
focused. And yet what we're speaking about, there's nothing about it that's external. Like, so I don't know about you, but like I just gotta chill. I struggle with that dance. Like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with, this deep wisdom knowing mystic that has lived millions of lives, not in this body.
Mm.
And then, working in functional medicine and mysticism, but with biohackers that are flow espresso machining and whatever else, injecting, and like, what comes up for you in that? Like, how do you make peace with that? How do you dance with it?
It's really interesting. And I think if you'd have asked me this 6 months ago, I'd have given you a different answer. But where I'm at now, I really feel like we are getting to be in the humanness of this reality. We're not spiritual people who are supposed to live in the mystic all the time. And so for me, the dance becomes, okay, so on this earthly plane, this vehicle, this meat suit needs to engage in socially receptive actions. And it isn't always fawning, as people say. It's not that fourth stress response. It's actually, no, social cues and being in connection. Those are how we connect back to the oneness that we are all one. So when we are being in relationship and maybe, engaging in dynamics with people who are not necessarily on our wavelength, my challenge is to remember that they may not be on my wavelength, but they are one with me. And so we get to navigate in a way that feels safe for each individual. And speaking professionally, that's my job. Like my job is to make each individual in my clinic feel safe to be themselves. And so it's interesting because I get to sit in every single one of my sessions. You've only sat in a session with me in the one dynamic. And there'll be people who see me in the same room that you saw me, the room that I'm sitting in now, and they will not understand the fact that I'm having this conversation because their consultation with me is all about lipids and biomarkers and hormone replacement and peptides. And that's great because that's their human lens and I get to be with them on that page. And I feel like, I think I used to think I needed to bring all of me to every interaction. Like you should get all of me, otherwise I haven't done my job or it's not worth it. And I've suddenly realized I can leave bits of me outside the door. I know they're part of me, but not everyone needs or wants all of it. And so
Mm.
dancing with the partner that I'm dancing with, rather than needing to dance to my own music all the time, is how I've learned to feel fulfilled within it.
So beautiful. It's something I've recently, I think, really stepped into is like, I think that's such a sense, like a sign of integration, where you
Mm-hmm.
meet people, you don't even meet people where they are. For me, I've just learned to listen. So, like, I came out of a relationship like a year and a half ago, and I've just decided to start dating very mindfully, very intentionally. And in that, you know, I'm saying yes, unless I'm like a real hard no. And I'm just listening, because
Mm-hmm.
instead of judging and deciding they're not for me, or pointing the finger at what they are not what I want or whatever else, it's like there's so much information, not even about them, about me. What triggers me, how I react, how I respond, what I'm attracted to, what my body's attracted to, like what I'm a fuck yes for, and what I'm like, no way, when something pushes my buttons or boundaries, and also
Mm-hmm.
learning not to react. And I
Yeah.
think in everything you say, like different scenarios, but like you're still dancing with someone else, whether a professional setting, personal setting. And in my practice too, working with coaching clients, it's a younger version of me did want to, answer and tell them and prove to them and like whatever it looked like. And now it's not my experience. I'm just here to witness it, reflect them so that they can step into the next version of self. And same, so I think, it takes so much patience, especially I think in a medical setting when you probably see, you see so many different types of people. You have all these sense energetically when they just walk in the room, what you feel, what you know. And oftentimes I believe when you come from a mystical lens, as you do, you can see through and see around in many senses, like what they can't see, what they can't feel, and what they might never be able to. And yet it's not your job to present that to them if it's not in a safe way, in a safe container. Like they might have years of trauma and they're coming to you with symptoms and have no idea. You can't tell them that, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, you have to learn to do a good job at understanding what the signals and the cues are and what they aren't. And you don't just instantly know this. I have messed up and got it wrong, and that's the only reason I know. And sometimes I will have missed doorways that would have been open and I just didn't say the thing. And I've had to step into a trust relationship with my practice where I trust that if I'm the person for that person, then the right words will come out of my mouth to unlock that thing. And if I'm not, I'm not. And I'm not the person for everyone. And like you, I'm sure you experienced this too. There was a time in our careers where we had to be the person for everyone because we had the magic keys. And it's like, I've got some magic keys and I've got some really boring keys that are just practical ones. And maybe you need my set of keys. And it's interesting as well, because I've ended up in the clinical setting and it was never clear to me that this would be where I would end up. And what I mean by that is I ran a very successful clinic on Harley Street in the medical heartland of London for many years. And the reason I stepped away, and I don't normally say this as honestly and brutally as this, but the reason I stepped away was because it started to feel inauthentic, because I wasn't showing up with the mystical side of it. I hadn't spoken about human design in, I don't know, 15 or so years, because I've been in it for 21, 22 years, like a long time. And I hadn't spoken about it, and then people didn't know. And I was witnessing trauma walk into my room, and I wasn't able to talk about it because I was supposed to give them a gut protocol with 15 supplements or a mold detox protocol. And I felt responsible for the marketing, for what I'd done and the reputation that I'd built up, that people were having this non-fruitful experience with me. They were getting symptomatically changed, but it wasn't really healing. So I stepped away, closed everything down happily just before the global pandemic, which was a good job I wasn't paying London rents during the global pandemic. But I thought I was going to end up being in my coaching, somatic experiencing, trauma world. I thought I was going to end up leading with that. And yet when I came over to Austin and I moved here, I actually ended up twice in two different clinical settings. And I'm a very big believer that you take the hints from the universe of where you should be. And I realized that it is my task to infuse some of this kind of clinical, kind of staid environment of medicine with that water energy. You mentioned it before. I've been talking about it a lot with my team here. It's where's the water? Where's the flow? Where's the feminine essence? Because medicine has been a very male-dominated industry, from the structures and the systems, but also the people running the show. And suddenly it's my playground. I get to say, hey, human design in a random medical setting when I'm supposed to be talking about your blood. And I do that with some people and I don't do it with everyone. And it's been delightful to me, especially in the clinic where I'm at now, to have the expanded perspective of the people that I'm working with, where people who've been trained in conventional medicine suddenly go, hey, that's interesting. And that means the world.
Yeah. And to that, it brings me back to your mention of this world coming to you at 17. Like it was almost the inception point of, your whatever adulthood trajectory into whatever, healing world, be it functional medicine or energetic, somatic, etc. And that because you light up when you speak to it, because it's not what you do. It's such a part of you. You didn't have to even study it, if you will. It was something you sort of understood, or it was implanted in you in a way, which is like so gorgeous. And then it leads me to wonder, when you decided then, you had all these body ailments and this energetic awakening, Kundalini, whatever we want to call it. And then you decided to go the functional medicine route, or to just, what's up with the body, or how can I heal, and all of that stuff. what did that decision look like? And where did that take, just right away, where did that did it take you away from the mysticism or, yeah?
Very much so. Yeah. So it was a practical decision in the end. It was weird. We were still in Devon, and I was having a lot of gut health symptoms still. And I needed to see a consultant. I just wanted to get checked out. And in order to get any help where we were, it's quite rural, it's quite remote. I was going to be waiting 6 months for a referral to a doctor on the NHS. And my mum and I just looked at each other and we were like, I can't wait that long. And as always happens with cultish spiritual communities, the Gene Keys community had just gone through a rupture, one of its necessary ruptures en route to where it is now. And so they'd kind of disbanded a bit and not easy stuff had happened within the community. And I was like, I need help. And so we physically moved. And so we moved all the way over to the southeast of England. And I was just away from the community. And I was in a hospital. I've been hospitalized 5 separate times. And so I ended up back in another hospital for another several month stay. And I was being analyzed under psych watch for most of these hospital stays, which meant that me writing endlessly in my journal when I was doing morning pages turned into obsessive thinking, and me keeping a note of what I was trying to eat so I could just make sure I was getting enough became obsessed about food, and everything became interpreted through the wrong lens. So I just stopped doing anything. It was just like, if I just sit and do nothing. And at that point, I was in pursuit of a diagnosis. And I have a memoir half written that will one day be published. And it's the memoir of the pursuit of a diagnosis, because for me, I have a genetic connective tissue disorder. And it may be not as important as my mystic's identity, but it's a real foundational framework to the way my structure is built. And I didn't know that until 10 years after I got sick. But knowing that piece, that foundational why, changed something in my nervous system. And this is why I still hold on to the medicine piece and don't just jettison it and say, hey, I'm just a spiritual person who's going to talk to you from the energetic plane. Because for me, I'm in a physical body. And it was the physical understanding that unlocked and unleashed the capacity to do everything else. And so now when I'm working with clients, I say, hey, we'll work from the bottom up. We'll get the physical sorted, but we'll also work from the top down, the energetic in. And if we do both, maybe it's quicker. I don't know. I haven't proven that yet, but it could be. But it's certainly more harmonious, and it's honoring all sides of who we are and what we're here to be. And we are here to be in a body. It's not that we get to just be spiritual beings. We're spiritual beings in physical form. And, when we are born, it is the quarter of form. We are based in the form principle. And so we get to be in this body. And my being in my body has been the most difficult thing of my entire life. It will constantly be my challenge to be in this body right now and feel at home.
Thank you for saying that so transparently, because I know that even being a medical, in the medical profession, you're supposed to put on this face that you are the picture of health and confidence and whatever else, and you're here to cure and help and save, and you're human. And I think such a beautiful segue to like the body, because, in a similar way, because of early trauma and being dissociated from my body at a very young age, not ever identifying with my body and always feeling separate from my body. It's only been in the past couple years where I actually can feel how food feels in my body. I actually can feel when movement is not, when I'm actually moving like against me, not for me, because for so long my nervous system was offline. And so being chased by a tiger running 10 miles every morning was so normal for me. And then having to come back from that, it's so strange because now I'm settling back in this costume and this skin, and it's not responding the way it used to. And instead it's hypersensitive to caffeine, to alcohol, to people, to noise, to light, and I'm having to learn to dance with this body I've been given and love this body. And, just in our recent actual, I think it's helpful if you're listening to, if you've never heard of this, mysticism and energetic in terms of functional medicine, I want to just speak to that in like hard examples. And I think the best way to do that is by sharing my experience and you sharing your experience. So like my recent experience, I came in to get blood work read, and, the two like red flags were my homocysteine levels were high, and I had some inflammation. And so the brain goes like, inflammation, that doesn't make any sense. I don't really eat salt. I sweat every day. I sleep. 8 to 10 hours, like on the, protocol. I'm the picture of health. There's nothing that I don't do. I've also like eliminated stress from my life. I'm not dating, like all of these things. And yet, you know, uh, my body's inflamed and I feel it inflamed. And then with the homocysteine marker, which I believe it's like, it's B12, like B12 deficiency, correct?
It can happen when you don't have enough B vitamins in general, yeah.
And then something with like methylated red blood cells, correct? So like
methylated B vitamins, so methylation to make energy for blood cells, yeah.
So when we were looking at that, like from an energetic perspective, well, so medical perspective versus energetic, can you just speak to that to just give a hard example?
Sure. I mean, medically, what we would say with a high homocysteine level and background inflammation is that you have inflamed vasculature, and so you're contributing to potential cardiovascular risk. That's what the homocysteine is there for. It's also, and this is where I struggle to just be medical in my brain, because some of the ways that homocysteine builds up is because there is a lack of cofactors, so nutrients and vitamins, to help all of your all of your cells to make the energy that it needs. And so you can get a buildup of one amino acid, and that's homocysteine. And the homocysteine amino acid contributes to vascular inflammatory burden, which can contribute ultimately to heart disease risk.
And
so
then
that's the medical version.
And then from an energetic perspective, when we look at it, like, what would you read from this?
There's a couple of things. Like if we've got cofactor deficiencies, I'm like, why aren't you receiving the nourishment from the food, especially in your situation? Like you can have those deficiencies because your diet's rubbish and you're not eating well and you've got missing things. When you are nourishing your body on paper, but you're not nourishing yourself cellularly and internally, it's like, well, why are you not receiving the nourishment from the good food that you're putting in? Or are you selectively avoiding foods because you have a control thing? So you're not getting maybe the B vitamins from red meat because you've done all this kind of restrictions. And where do those restrictions and desires for control come from? And also when inflammation's at play, you can eliminate stress from your life, but you have a nervous system that might be holding on to patterns of holding, essentially. It's like, do I need to be stressed tomorrow? Is as stressful as I'm stressed right now. Like, where is the certainty? I want this thing is as stressful to the nervous system as there's a saber-toothed tiger coming towards me. It doesn't know the difference. And so inflammation can be preparatory in terms of I might need to react tomorrow. And so when you have both of these, I can give you the supplement for the homocysteine and it will work. But if you stop it, we're going to get back to where we ended up. Also, the funny thing with you is we'd already recommended the supplement for the homocysteine and it just fallen off your awareness to take it. And so I'm like, yeah, we can take the supplement, but also we need to focus on the nourishment and receiving and being in a space of being okay with your cells and all the things where you are right now.
I mean, like mic drop, because that's literally this is why I think your work is so, because, the typical doctor wouldn't be able to read that way. And I think for me, just like prime example, it is like, holding on to like everything's good right now, but what could happen? Like what might happen around the corner? Right. Or like, feeling so called to share, create, inspire, help, heal, hold. And what I believe right now is I'm being taught the greatest test of patience in my life of like, the timeline isn't up to me. So back to this like femininity, water flow of this true test of surrender, and how brilliant is it that like my blood work is literally showing that.
Well, and the other thing as well, like there's the whole cellular spinning of creating energy and how we get to where we get to with the homocysteine buildup. It's like a process is being interrupted. And that's exactly what you were explaining to me from the perspective of I want this stuff to come out of me, but there is some kind of interruption in it. And maybe that interruption is perfect. Timing, flow, timing's not up to you, all of that kind of stuff. And maybe we're arresting our own expression. Where are we not happy to take the shortcuts? Because there is a shortcut pathway in the whole homocysteine methionine cycle, and you get to take the shortcuts sometime and be okay. And so it's not that everyone with homocysteine that's high can go away and think that this is the solution. But what I do, and I'm very keen to express this, is you give me enough clues in the way you show up, anyone does, in their session with me, that I have an energetic interpretation on everything that I'm saying physically. And whether it's gut issues or fungal yeast infections, or there's always a lens of, well, yeah, but what how is this going to be manifesting in the energy system, not just the physiological system? And it's not the same all the time. It's not like we can have a manual of like, oh yes, when I have pain in my left foot, it's always this. It's your specific pain in your left foot, which comes from this thing for you. So it's not like you can get a textbook and just create one. And I have been asked to do that. Like, can you just not create the textbook of what each symptom means? It's not that. It's a storyline. Your body is telling me a story. Your lab work is telling me a story. And it's up to me which glasses I put on to read it. And it's up to you which glasses you want me to use and which ears you want to listen with.
And so in that, like, part of me perks up and is like, what's the shortcut? Can we move through this faster? You know, like, let's just get this done versus like.
Well, there is though. And this is it. You get to say, you know, you could just do it tomorrow. There's something that's stopping you, and that might be the healthiest thing in the world, but whatever you want to express, you could just say it tomorrow. There is a shortcut, but something inside of you, and maybe it's your inner wisdom and maybe it's your inner trauma, and that's your challenge to figure out. Sometimes it's just holding us back and saying, hey, pause, just hold. And that's as valuable as having the shortcut. And you get to choose which one you move through. And what I love about that is the discernment between what is my inner wisdom and what is my inner triggers is a deep gift. If we can identify, you mentioned it earlier about relationship, where my trigger's coming up and don't react. Well, sometimes it's not a trigger. It's you don't get to behave like that in relationship with me. No negotiables, not a trigger, just no. But sometimes it's a history. And so working out what is part of this scenario, this relationship, this moment versus what is a hesitation or something that's coming up from the past, and discerning those two is really important. And I'm sorry, I interrupted you totally, but I just wanted to make that point.
No, I love that. And bringing it back to the body, like this vessel, this vehicle that holds all of it, because, you know, also like in my journey, because I don't know if like cellular, whatever else, or my life has sort of calmed, and, you know, from the outside, it's like my diet's the same, I'm moving the same, except like not like a crazy wild animal every morning running out of bed at 5 a.m., like from my, you know, burning out my adrenals. And I think, you know, that healing those parts of us take a long time to level out. But like where I am, you know, I've been back and forth with you of like, it feels like my body is, I think inflammation, it's like, it's in my hips, it's in my thighs, you know, like, and this is like how I'm reacting and responding to the body that holds me, keeps me safe, functions properly. But like, and I speak to this really openly because I hope if you're listening, that if you're experiencing any sort of thing with your physical body, that like, that you're not alone, that no matter how, you know, whatever things look on the outside, we all have things that we carry or stories that we hide behind. And so in that, you know, where I am right now, I feel like my body's never felt this way and I can't explain it and I don't understand it. And so when I recently emailed you, you wrote back to me something so beautiful I want to share. You said, what is possible if you focus on your body being solely a vehicle for the spiritual essence of yourself? Not a dancer's body, not lean, not ripped, not anything, just a vehicle for your soul to find an earthly home. Not a figure, not a dimension, not a somebody's body, but a being whose every muscle, sinew, and cell is only here to manifest you. What comes up for you when you spend some time with this thought process? And it was such a beautiful note to wake up to, and wildly symbolic of a dream I had about Christ's body, you know, that night, in being like church and religious thing, but to think that way of like, we do live in this external society. We live in this culture where, you know, there's such a focus on two-dimension and how things look and how we can manufacture or fix or change or inject or fill or, you know, de-wrinkle or de-bloat. And, you know, I'd be remiss to say that I don't get caught up in it. And I think for me, the frustration comes when like, well, I do all the right things and like the blood work is, or something's different. And as you said prior, you know, we are decaying beings. We do change, our metabolisms change, whatever else. But I think like, could you just speak to what you said? Because I think it's really beautiful to anyone here listening that has had struggles with their body, with this home that carries them, as we both have, you know, as many of us have.
I think we have to live a dual life. So there is the visual, and people's perception of us changes based on how we present. But what we've been taught by society is that it's just how we look. What we haven't really been like honed as women in particular, and I can only speak as a woman, obviously, but as women in particular, we haven't really been taught that everything is showing up in our energy field. And so what we think is a look is a holding, it's a presentation, and it doesn't need to be anything external to be appreciated by the external. We don't need to be in a control relationship with it. And from my perspective, when I wrote that to you, I was writing it as much to myself as I was writing it to you, as I was writing it just as a statement on, we do this. I do this. I look at my body, and I've changed a lot physiologically in the last 6 months, and people are looking at me differently. And it's proving every fear that I ever had, that fat Victoria wasn't okay and thin Victoria is the one that everyone loves. And it's like, I didn't change as a human being. But what I realized is that other people can have their opinions about my body, and they always have my entire life. I have been judged, I have been criticized, I have been, for all sorts of reasons, overweight, dramatically underweight. And it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks of my body, except it matters sometimes what they see, because they might treat me differently. And that's an entirely them story. And if people are going to be like that, they get to have that narrative and live that existence. But this meat suit that I'm sitting in right now, to be honest, it does feel better, thinner. And I get to own that as a truth. And I get to hold, hey, I like this. I like being able to feel like I'm attractive or wear a sexy dress or whatever. But it's not for anyone else. And for me, when I talk about being at home in my own body, and when I talk about what would it be like if we just get to contemplate that this is my earthly vehicle, I'd stop looking at the mirror thinking, oh, I could probably do with a bit of Botox. And I find myself looking in my eyes, not at my hips, not at my belly, not at anything that I can criticize from the objective external if I was someone looking at me lens. When I think this is the home for my soul, the only place to look is the eyes. Then everything doesn't matter. And so I'm not a fan of like forced mirror work, like staring at yourself in the mirror and trying to tell yourself you love yourself, because that can just feel weird. But what I am a fan of is going, hey, soul, this is home. What does that feel like for a minute? And, you know, I'm in pain right now as I sit here. I did a stupid workout this weekend, handstands, ow. But that pain goes away when I think, hey, this is home. Because then suddenly the pain's fine. The bit of belly fat that I've got is fine. The fact that I'm bloated today is fine. The fact that I've got a spot is fine, because my soul is just having a human experience, and this is its home.
That is so beautiful. And it so resonates. And it's interesting because, you know, I have signs all over my home, my external home.
Actual home.
Yeah, like all over the fridge, just like things like before I leave the house, it literally says like, I will not accept lesser crowns. Just like if I'm going on a date, just to remember like my royalty, if you will, or like pace over race. If I'm like rushing out and it's like, no, baby girl, like slow down. But it's interesting, the mirror work, I never, you know, that's been a reference I've heard, and affirmations. And I've also learned affirmations. For me, I do a very different, like, you know, self-pleasure practice, if you will. And it's affirming so that it gets in my cells, that I believe this, that my body knows and affirms, as opposed to me looking and saying. But
sure.
On my mirror in my bathroom for a while, I had literally a sign, and every day it was my work to, I love you, I choose you. And it would just be, I would wake up, see myself, and that was it. And it wasn't just, I love you, it was, I choose you. Because I think there's such a difference in just the dynamic of that word, of actually choosing yours and choosing this home, or this home chose you. So like, make it cozy. And it's, I would say that, you know, this is a sweeping generalization, but like, it seems like it is the most hyper fixated insecurity, like the body, because, you know, you have one body, you want another body, you have this body, you're told to have this body. And it's like, everyone's just projecting their own insecurity. And we're in this like fucked up stew of like self-hate and self-sabotage, and nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's just like, if we all could just see ourselves in our eyes as our soul, as you said, like what a lovely, wonderful place this would be.
And it would be easier to see everyone else that way too.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's been beyond patience and surrender. My biggest lesson has been to, if I ever feel the sense of like pointing a finger outwards, like at the gym or notice some, whatever it is, it's always pointing it back at me to like honor that this is what I'm saying about myself. And I don't even give it space any longer. And yeah, it would be such a kinder world if we stopped picking holes in everyone else and actually focused on what we were dealing with in our hearts. And yeah, so to bring this to a close, you know, if someone is looking for seeking, if you will, more understanding of their sense of self, of in relation to health or otherwise, like where would you tell them to start?
It depends on where you want to focus. And what I mean by that is everyone has a different doorway, and that is really important to honor. So it isn't the take home from this, from listening to this, is I need to go and get a human design reading, although that is a good way to start if you want to. But it might be, I need to go get comprehensive lab work done just to take care of myself in that way. And you can order that yourself. You don't need a physician to find it. You know, there's companies that will interpret it for you. Or it could be, you just want to go on YouTube and listen to Richard Rudd talk about something. His voice is so British and meditative and amazing. You won't even need to listen or understand the words. It will be an experience. That could be your doorway. And honestly, curiosity is the only ingredient you need to be able to take the next step. And what that means is when those symptoms come up, or when that judgment that you have comes up, becoming relentlessly curious. Be that 3-year-old child that always asks why of yourself, so that you start to relate to yourself with enjoyment and like, oh, this is interesting. This is the best movie I get to watch ever. My own self being human and full of flaws. That's the piece that you need. And the curiosity will start to unlock things. And play this episode next to your phone or on your phone, so your Instagram feed starts to give you the right information. It doesn't matter. There's no one way. But if self-awareness is where you want to be, looking into the Gene Keys website, looking into the Human Design website, the official ones, which I'm sure you'll put in show notes and things, will be a good place to begin.
Beautiful. I always say you have to learn yourself to love yourself. And that to me is what live young means. Very much, yeah, live young is this choice, this feeling of being alive. And in my journey, I've come to understand, again, with this like inward versus external, you know, dance. As I always share, the doors of my Box and Flow studios said everything you need is inside, and there were no mirrors in the space. And I'd like to close on that note to ask the guest, what does that mean to you? Everything you need is inside.
To me, it means that as long as you are willing to take the space and have the patience and the compassion to hear your inner voice, it is always there. And it is always trying to get your attention. And all it really requires is you sitting and being safe enough to be with yourself.
Whew, what a journey. Yes. Thank you for that. Is there anything else on your heart that you want to share beyond where people can find you and all the other goodies?
I think I would just like to share a thank you, because what I shared with you after our time together only a couple of weeks ago now was that during our session, you gave me the platform, even in a small medical session, to be more of myself than I usually get to be in a clinical setting. And it has opened the door to me being even more of it. And my next team gathering is actually going to be a prayer circle, and I'm going to lead a water blessing. And all of this came up because I got the chance to be myself with you. And so the fact that you are someone who facilitates that for other people is a true, genuine gift, whether it's on this platform or on your dates that you're going on, or just in your circle. Thank you for allowing people to feel safe enough to be able to express more of themselves.
Oh my gosh. If there is one compliment, that would be it. That means so much to me. Thank you. It is my honor. It was such a gift to spend time with you and spend time with you today. Where can people find you?
The best place to find me is going to be on Instagram. My handle is Victoria L Fenton. There's a little L for Louise in there. It's the best place to find me. You can send me a direct message, and I'm more than happy to be contacted. And if people want more information, they can reach me there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.